We're going to make the Boho Escape project recipe. This one is from 2021 and should be fast, easy, and beautiful. I selected this beautiful navy blue paper from the Beach Scenes designer paper pack. I chose two papers from the Vivid Melodies 2 Island Waters designer paper pack. I chose this sheet to be the second designer paper, and I chose two sheets of this to be the background. Here are the cutting guides for Boho Escape. We have a tone-on-tone paper number 1 and a tone-on-tone paper number 2. For this layout, they used a very colorful background paper. However, for me, all three of my papers are tone-on-tone. I just didn't find the right paper to go with my photos that had a nice, very colorful background. But this layout is so amazing that I see myself making it again when I find just the right papers. I noticed something different about the cutting guide for this project recipe. There are no photo mats. They treat this strip, which is a 5.5 by 12, and this strip, which is the same, as the mats for some of the photos. Now, of course, you know that I'm going to mix some things up. I'm going to probably cut my borders from a different paper because I don't think the reverse side of this is going to actually work for my photos. So I'll probably find a scrap to make these punched borders. And I hope I will use the reverse sides that is called for here with piece I and piece J, but we'll see. This is a very repeatable design. You could make it over and over again and you would not tell you're working from the same design. So getting ready to cut my paper, my tone-on-tone paper number 1 calls for 8.5 by 6 inches. Now, my paper is directional, and so I want to make sure I'm going to cut it in the way that it will look the way I want on my layout. And so I want what looks like water ripples to be going horizontal on my page. And when I look at the layout, this is piece E and F, and they are going to be 6 inches wide by 8.5 inches tall. So I want to cut my 8.5 inches right here such that it's going across parallel to the direction of my wave. So I want to make my first cut at 8.5 and I want to cut the length this way. So I'm going to cut my paper 8.5 inches in height. So my first cut, 8.5. And this may or may not be used. I don't think the back side is going to work for this layout, but we'll see. Now I want it 6 inches this way. So I rotated the paper and I'm cutting 6 inches. And I have my two pieces that are 6 inches across, 8.5 inches tall. This piece calls for piece G and A on tone paper number 2 to be 5.5 inches wide. And I need two pieces that are 5.5 inches. So we now have our main pieces cut, and our layout guide shows these two 5.5-inch wide pieces going on the inside next to each other, and these two 8.5-inch tall pieces butting up against them like this. So the remaining pieces to put on the layout for paper are piece I and J, which are 1 inch tall by 6 inches wide, that go down here at the bottom. And then piece A, B, C, and D are borders that are punched. And so that's going to be the next step. I'm going to select the paper and the borders to punch A, B, C, and D. So I've chosen this scrap of paper to make my borders for piece A, B, C, and D on the left and right. And the punch I've chosen is the Scallop Bubbles. And this piece of paper came from Winter Bliss. But I think this tone on tone blue is a great match and will go beautifully on top of this darker blue. And so I really wanted the combination of blue and island waters together. And that's what is going to work, I think, with my photos. So I'm going to punch 2 rows of the scallop bubbles, and then I'm going to cut them. And according to the instructions, trim the border to 1.5 inch. So once I've cut them, I'll trim them down to 1.5 inch, and then I'll cut them in half at 6 inches. Remember this piece that was left over after cutting these 2 pieces? The instructions say use the reverse side and cut it at 6 inches and make pieces I and J. And that's what I'm going to do. So here's the dry fit of everything down on the page. And I have a couple of thoughts I wanted to share with you. First of all, whether or not to put these dots on this paper at the top or at the bottom. Now, generally, I would think the bottom, because for me, in my eye, the weight, the color and the weight are here at the bottom. So I believe this is the way I prefer. So I will adhere it down with the darker colors at the bottom of the page, because to me, that's sort of the weight. The next thing is the placement of these items. And I'm going to begin with a margin of 1 1/4 of an inch from the bottom to place this piece, sort of anchoring it to get the rest of this going. So this will be 1 1/4 inch from the bottom. And I think that should mean I get 1¼ inch margin at the top. And I really do like this. I think the blue and the island waters are an interesting combination that I happen to just like, especially among the Creative Memories color palettes. I didn't want to go monochrome, and I think with my photos, these colors will work together very well. So I'm going to adhere everything down, spare you the boredom of watching me do that, and then I'll be back to talk about my photos. So here is our beautiful base page. I really like this, and I definitely want to make it again. It's just a gorgeous design. So now for the photos. So now looking at the photo layout, I'll start on the left where there's a place for a vertical 4x6, either matte or a photo. It's vertical. And then in the center are 6 spaces for photos that are 5 inches by 3½ inches. And then on the right, another vertical 4-inch by 6-inch matte or photo. Let's see what I have. And to my surprise, this is one of the rare times where many of my photos are the same size as the project recipe. Now, not all of them are, but most of them are today. So let's begin with the left side, photos in the middle. They are 5 inches by 3½ inches, and they fit lovely. On the far left, it calls for a 6½ matte or photo. Now, I got to share this matte. Obviously, pumpkins is not the subject of my layout today, but it is a lovely matte and it's going to work. However, my photo is not vertical. And I also did not want to trim it down more than a tiny amount. So I did trim off 1/4 inch, and it will mat perfectly, but it's going to go on horizontally. And I'm going to let it hang off the blue on the far left a little bit, but this is going to fit just perfect for me on the left. On the right, we have more 5-inch by 3½ inch photos. And that goes just right in that spot. But right here, I don't have a vertical 4x6 for here either. But what I do have is a 4x4. Actually, I have 3 4x4s and I want them all on the page. So I'm going to put a peekaboo pocket down to get all 3 of these photos into this spot. So I'm going to just put him there. He's going to be the top photo. I'm going to adhere the rest of this down, and I'll be back with whatever finishing touches we put to this layout and be ready to call this project recipe complete. And here's the final layout of the Boho Escape project recipe. I found some stickers in the Totally Tonal Island Water sticker set. And I used the Lagoon shimmer paper and I punched the embossed scallop shell from Creative Memories, a recent punch that makes this awesome embossed seashell. And I love it. And I'll put a note above and a link to a video I made using the embossed scallop shell to make something very pretty. I hope you have enjoyed watching me make the Boho Escape project recipe. This is one that I'm going to make again someday. I'm sure of it. And I hope you'll like the video, subscribe to the channel, and YouTube says there's another video coming up. I hope that you'll watch it also. Have a fine, scrappy day.